Good day to you, partner. I'm Guy, and I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken camp.
Okay, hey, this is Wheat Solo. I'm gonna make a video about necromancers. I'm showing off my gear. I see a lot of videos talking about how incredible necromancers are, summoning necromancers specifically for starting off characters. It kind of pisses me off because I actually think they're one of the worst specs to start off as a necromancer. I actually think they get better with more gear, as any class does, but I think they benefit from gear more than a bone necro. Not really a poison necro, because poison's the best necromancer with the best gear. But as you can see, I'm pretty decked out. I wouldn't say I'm GG in game, but I'm on my way there. Technically, you'd move away from Trangles, as almost any build in the game moves away from their set, the better they are. But I just kind of wanted to stick with it because it looks cool. I mean, it does look cool. And then if you move, what am I make a Chains of Honor and look like a bum? I don't know. Anyways, I like it. It looks cool. So here's my skills. I wanted to show you. I have a CTA on swap. CTA is the single best item you can make. If you're going to summon at all, go for Trangles set first, get a full set of skillers, and then the next thing you do, I mean, if you have the money, buy a CTA even before your skillers. If you have enough to make it, make a CTA. It is so worth the investment, it's ridiculous. If you don't want to risk the roll, you can buy a low one. It is important. The better it is, the more damage buff it gives. CTA was nerfed, mainly because they changed the way the prospective skills buffed. Basically, you get a lot less health, but you do get a nice damage buff for your minions, and that's why I think as a Summonmancer, it's still just as good. I mean, it's not. It's basically the weapon's gone from the best weapon in the game for every single build in the game, hands down. I mean, even Barb's Wear, it's like the best item in the game, to just a really good item for certain builds, and always something that can be the cherry on top. By the way, I am playing awfully right now. If you're summoning, one of the nice things about it is that you have all these free plus skills, and so you have a free blood warp without investing any points into it. So that's kind of nice. The reason I choose to farm keys with the teleporting areas is because actually doing the areas where you can't teleport as a summoner is incredibly frustrating because your minions continuously despawn. Sometimes, like earlier, I would go, you know what? I'm just going to clear everything on the way. That's not that big of a deal, right? I could find some stuff. Man, I could not play right now. But I would clear everything on the way and they'd still despawn. Like, if you don't summon your minions every once in a while, they'll just wander away and die. It's really fucking stupid. I mean, I wish they could fix it even more than it is. I remember back in the old days before Necromancers, the synergy change in 1.09. Dude, your minions, well, for one, they were pointless, unless they were revives. But revives, they would just gone. And it's almost like that now. It's like your women, I have a girlfriend, next thing you know, she's despawned. Next time I see her, she's basically an NPC. You don't run keys anymore, or torches, sorry. It's really frustrating because they're so cheap now unless you just get the best rolls for a very specific amount of classes. Basically, Sork, Paladin, Assy is desired. Necromancers are pretty desired, not like the other classes, but, it's where something's on. So I stopped doing it, but I just wanted to show you that we're pretty good at it. And again, only do the ones where you teleport. See, this is where it kind of comes, it makes me upset when people say, I almost got that though, and then I don't know, maybe it was worth it to grab it. By the way, you can trade low runes, like 130 for a Vex or something like that, for crafting and map rolling and shit like that. So they're actually worth quite a bit. What was I going to say? Oh, if you wanted to do the ones where you run, which arguably is better for a Necromancer, because Blood Warp is so frustrating unless you have full rejuves on lock. I guess Well, you'd have to run Bone. I don't even think Poison would be very good at it. I guess Poison could be an option, but basically, that's why I think when you're starting out, the best Necromancer build is actually Bone, because you can have low gear, and Teeth will clear low content for you fast. Like, maybe it won't kill the champs or the higher health minions, but at least you can cast Teeth once, run through. Cast Teeth twice, run through. With Summoning, when you have low gear, not only can you, well, if you run past, your enemies will, your skeletons will despawn. But skeletons aren't very good at grabbing aggro anyway, so when you run past, you might die because you have low gear. Trust me, unless you have a nice amount of FHR, you're just gonna run around and die. Like, I have like no FHR on this character. It's retarded, and it's really underrated for. Ooh, nice, that was good. Um, so go Teeth. That's what you should pick as a Necromancer with no gear, not Summoning. And I don't like people who suggest Summoning as just a catch-all, end-all, because the way the game works is every build can farm without gear. That's how the game works. The game is not a question of what is your class or build good for. It's, I mean, not what build is good for A or B. It's what build does A or B fastest. That's the entire game. And to be honest, a Sork is the answer to most of those questions. Even without gear. Yes, depending on what you want to do, higher in content, you definitely need very good gear for your Sork, but the same thing goes for a Summonmancer. Trust me, I did a blank map with pretty shitty Necromancer gear, like pre-plus 20 skills. It took forever to clear. It sucked. So anyways, I wouldn't call this a starting off build. So why am I running skeletons? Well, there's an interesting thing you can do with skeletons, and that's called snapshotting. And basically what that means is you see all my good gear? I'm leaving it on right now because I do want to teleport around and get to Isuel. But once I summon my skeletons, they stay that good for the rest of the game. So eventually you're going to see me swap out my gear, get to a nice 427 MF. I keep my Triangle set on. I used to swap that out before too, but it just didn't really work out. Like, I would just evaporate, you know, like a Burning Soul or, you know, Succubuses. It's not a good look, dude. You're gonna die. So you can swap out your gear, and then you can kind of just run whatever you want, because your skeletons aren't gonna die because I have Weaken. If I need, I can always run Life Tap. Life Tap is actually better for your melee skeletons. And if you feel like you're fighting like a map with harder enemies, you should switch to Life Tap to keep them alive. If you're running base, you know, blank maps, your skeletons will be fine at a higher level. Even like a tier 3 map, if you're running a blank map, Weaken's enough. Your skeletons aren't going to die. If you're near plus 50 skills like me, they don't die to much. Maybe like a Fana Might pack might kill them off with amp damage or start killing them off. So you can do maps with good MF. You can go and do a Chaos run. Here's a skill shrine, so you're going to see me resummon all my minions, which is kind of frustrating. It takes time. But basically for the rest of the game, I am going to be dope. Dude, my skeletons are going to do 2.7k with 8 of them, with amp damage at minus 70, with 8 more skeleton mages doing about 2k damage themselves. And skeleton mages are what really hold back skeletons still, because you have to invest 60 skill points. By the way, until you get Faith on your Merc, do not run skeletons. At all. Don't. Just go 20 into Clay Golem, 20 into Gay Mastery. It's because I was combining Golem and Mastery, okay? Totally wasn't a Freudian slip. I promise. No Freudian dicks here. I guarantee you that. So Golem Mastery, 20 into that, 20 into Clay Golem, 20 into wow, Clay Golem, Golem Mastery. It's like asking for you to slip up, okay? Maybe. Probably some Illuminati stuff, deep state. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to hide things in plain sight. Trick good American males such as myself. Good heterosexual single white males, 5'10" uncut. You know what I'm talking about. And everybody expects us to shut up, but we won't, because it's a bunch of CRAP crap. Back to the question at hand, I finally found Isuel. You go 20 into clay, 20 into mass. By the way, don't go full golem. I don't know why people ever... There's literally a very well formatted Reddit post talking about the curse golem build. And I actually clicked it because I was like, oh, that sounds cool, because I want to run curses. And I want to run golems. And the first thing it said was, you have 3 options. And I'm like, huh? I don't know, what does that mean? You can go full golem. And I'm like, why would I do that? And he said, put 20 points into all of Golem Tree. And I'm like, what would that do? It did not even get that good. It's like, did you playtest this at all? Because I actually playtested a bit of investing more into the synergies. It's not worth it. The benefit is very little. And then it was full curses. And I'm like, again, you're just literally putting all the points into all the synergies. Like, why am I reading this? And then the last option was part curse, part golem. And it was just, I'm like, did you even experiment to see what works? So I did. I tried skeletons early on. I was very frustrated. I switched to the clay golem, mastery, revive with amp damage. And that's where I started to find some success. The reason why skeletons aren't good is you have to invest 60 skill points because they tied them all together. You can't just, like in vanilla, when they put in synergies, you could just go skeleton mastery. And right now, if that was the case, probably golems would still be a bit better, but it wouldn't be by much. But when you have to invest 60 skill points and your skeletons are marginally better than 5 golems, that's about how it feels. It doesn't add up. 60 to 40 doesn't add up. If I'm spending 60 points into a tree, it should feel better than 40 points into a very similar tree. I mean, let's be honest, we're summoning minions. So if clay golems and skeletons want to be comparative, then if I invest 40 into one and 60 into the other, the one I invest 60 into should feel more powerful to me. So by the way, I showed you I did the swap. Right now I have 427 MF, and I can just go around in MF areas and kind of have a fun time. And so that's why I switched to this, is because I don't have to worry about revives running out. And if your revives run out, you can summon revives with MF gear, because revives, it's not about how many skill points you have. By the way, those are blundergores. Those are the second best minion to revive in the game. The best are lords. I think I just went to Ancient's Way for a second to show that off, and I forgot to talk about it. My apologies. Good place to find them is Ancient's Way. They can be in Halls of Pain, whatever that's called. They can be on the way to Bale. But every time you look for the best minion to revive, you're wasting time. So when I was running Clay Golem Revive, what I would do is I'd start at Ancient Way. If they're not there, I'm done. I did run games where I would check Halls of Pain and even keep killing the heal attack just so I don't waste my time. And then I do Bale next just to see if I get lucky. And I found it to be very frustrating. Basically, this game already has so much RNG in it because there's a base lottery system where every time you kill an enemy, it, cranks the wheel and pops out an item. And it picks an item, and then it picks unique, and then it picks, rare, and then magic, and then plain or F. And I didn't want to add more RNG into whether or not I could find a quality revive. So what I do is I go to Ancient's Way, I don't find it, I'm done. I go right here, I go to River of Flame, and I start teleporting up. And then if I see Blundergores, boom, I pick those babies, because they are close to as good as Moonlords. They're actually better than Moonlords before Moonlords have full Frenzy, and once Moonlords have their Frenzy up, their amount of damage they do... You know how I said that golems, spending 40 points onto them, is about better than 60 points into skeletons? And it just doesn't make sense how 40 to 60... Like, once you get Faith, your skeletons feel noticeably better, but you're still spending 60 points into them, which is still kind of frustrating that you have to spend 20 more hard points and get a quality unique item to really feel like they're close to worth the investment. Well, revives are even more... what's the word for it? The discrepancy between spending 20 points to 60 points is even more noticeable. Because even with Faith, if I have 6 Moonlords up, they're better than my 16 skeletons are with Faith. I've tested this. I've noticed it. Literally 6 Moonlords, if they're at full attack speed, they'll kill Diablo quicker than my 16 skeletons with Faith. And that's always been a problem with Revive. When Necromancers sucked, you could actually use Revive and have a lot of success with it. Because as long as you got, a good minion, like a Blundergore, they're nuts. If you have 30 Blundergores in vanilla LOD, you can just teleport around and smash face. It's disgusting. And of course, you had Corpse Explosion with 100% base life. By the way, there's an idea of running Corpse Explosion as a one-off. I don't think it's worth it. I wouldn't say it'd be bad, but literally spending time to cast something that does 5% of corpse health, it would be worth more of your time to probably cast a curse. And as you've noticed, I don't have a lot of time after casting 3 curses anyways. If you're doing harder tier maps, like if you're doing a really hard tier 3, it would probably be worth it then to run Corpse Explosion. But it would have a very niche role, and it would still do less damage than my minions. The only way it would ever be worth it to run Corpse Explosion anymore, and by the way, people have invested points into its skill tree and synergies, and been very disappointed with the results. There is a way to run it, but it's just not really worth it. The way it would be worth it is if you go Revives, it's a natural synergy, and you get like 1 point into Corpse Explosion or just a few. And in a high density map, it would do something. So here you go. You can see the MF. I got 427. Pretty nice. So I was realizing that my gameplay would suffer by having to deal with Revives. And if there weren't Blundergores, by the way, another great minion are Threshers. They're in Act 3. Very, very good choice. I would say they're noticeably better than any other minion. Like the top 3 to me, Lords, Blundergores, Threshers. But after that, it drops off really heavily. Like for instance, I've tested Scarabs. I've tested those just base Act 5 grunts. They're worse than your 8 skeletons. So the problem with Revive is it's a very imbalanced skill because there are certain enemies that are just too good. So I almost want them to get rid of the skill because I don't like the idea of my gameplay being determined by more factors in this game where so much of my gameplay is already determined by so many random factors. And even if you find the right minion, when you have your revives up, they only last 10 minutes with 50 skill points. So what I would do is I could do a Chaos run, a Bale run, and Shank and Eldritch every time in under 10 minutes. And that kind of worked. And I just went with Skeletons because this way I don't have to only play for 10 minutes. And it really is you play for 10 minutes. Because once your revives die, let's say you do a tier 2 map. Because tier 2 maps can actually spawn Moonlords. Just naturally. They have a random variance in the map minion pool. Even if it spawns Moonlords, and you're like, cool, that's awesome. Hey, I'll go get my 6, and then when they run out, I'll just spawn 6 more, and I'll keep my MF gear on, because, revives, they're only losing like 20% damage. Revive only loses 2% per skill point. That's a really small loss, actually. Skeletons gain more like 10% damage with every single skill point. Yeah, it's almost 250. It might be 5% actually. I think it's more like 125 per skill point. So that's how you notice that there might be an idea in this game where skeletons they scale the best. Like if you had an infinite amount of skill points, skeletons would do the most damage. Technically, probably Moonlords would be better because they attack so quickly. But skeletons would do the most damage. Let's say you had infinite skill points and a boss with infinite health. Skeletons would do the most damage, although at infinity... Never mind. Infinity minus infinity is infinity. But let's use mathematics to prove my point, which doesn't even prove my point. Awesome, Keith. Wow, you're so smart. Anyways, they scale the best. Let's say you had 100 skill points. Skeletons would probably be better than Moonlords. If you could find a boss, hard enough. I think even Dclone would be rendered impotent at that point, and you wouldn't even notice the difference. But like right now with 50 skill points, I would say I am comfortable that skeletons are worth these 60 skill points over the 40 points in the clay golems with faith. And that's still not very satisfying to me, that I feel comfortable saying that. Because I do know that if I just dealt with revives, I would clear content quicker. I would just have less fun doing it. And one of the biggest things about Diablo 2 is you have to build a class that you will keep playing the game with. Because in the end, the best way to MF isn't your build or the area. It's that you keep playing the fucking game. Like, people always ask, what should I do? I can't, and the answer is just keep playing the game. You know, you could even be an idiot and run, dumb areas. Like, I have a friend who likes to run Plains of Despair. But guess what? He plays the game a lot. And if running Plains of Despair keeps him MFing, then keep running Plains of Despair. You know why? Because he plays the game more doing that. And then he finds good stuff. I mean, really, in the end, you can find almost everything in level 83 areas. There's only, like 3 items that can't drop in the game in level 83, or like 6? It's not a big deal. So for me, it makes me want to play the game more using my skeletons, which is kind of funny because clay golems are such the novel ability, and I like their idea behind it. It's very cool to have 5. It's a good start on the summoning tree. Skeletons need work. I think either they should make them scale even higher, as in I should feel even more powerful than I am right now, spending 60 points than golems, or separate them to where you only have to invest 40 or 40. Or if you want, you can have both anyways. I think skeletal mages, even with their change of piercing spells, they're not good enough. I think they have to give them Fire Blast, and what's the other one? Glacial Spike, I believe, is the ice spell that does AoE. And I don't even know if that would be a problem, just to give them a flat AoE effect rather than a pierce effect. Maybe it wouldn't even make them that much better, actually. Maybe piercing is still better. It's just the way the game works. When you have a lower resist, you just can't invest enough points, Like, I have 20 into Curse Mastery and 20 into Amp Damage. I can't really do better than that. The only better I could do is go 10 into Curse Mastery and put a little more points into lower resist. I don't think it would be worth it, because my skeletons do the majority of my damage anyways. So now let's go talk about the last thing, which is why I always talk about only spending 60 points at most in the summoning. And that's because you can go, by the way, if you have faith and you have good gear, you can go 80, which it would be 60 into skeletons, 20 into revive, and then you would put the last 20 into amp damage. It's a solid spec. It's probably the best overall vanilla, harder mapping spec. So if you have, like, tier 3 hard maps or tier 1 hard maps with annoying affixes, you'd probably just want to run that. The reason I choose to run this 60-40 split is because I can snapshot, not worry about my revives, and then the last thing is I get 20 into amp damage and 20 into Curse Mastery. And so that allows me to telestomp more aggressively. So as you'll see in this map, it's a blank one. I can actually telestomp still fairly aggressively. Maps introduced something into Diablo 2 which was foreign to the game, which is apparent in POD. And that's a skill set of being able to quickly identify how dangerous a monster group is. And that really wasn't a thing in Diablo 2. For instance, before they redid the game in 1.09, which is to revamp Hell difficulty and make it extremely, extremely harder than it was actually very funny because Act 5 used to be the easiest act in the game. Okay, I guess it was harder than Act 1. But Act 5 was pretty easy. Act 4 was much harder. There was only a few challenging natural enemies to Act 5. A lot of the enemies were very poorly designed. Or they had more interesting enemies that don't really affect combat very much, like the little, the little floating things. I don't even know what they do. They just float around and eat dead minions. And then they die. Anyways, so they redid Hell difficulty, made it much more difficult. But it's not really a thing of, oh my god, I need to look at the affixes on this champ pack and identify in seconds, literally 1 second, whether I can fight it or not. Because if I fight it and die, I'm going to lose my ability to get rank 1, or I'm hardcore and I just lost my character. Diablo 2 is more of a game where in hardcore, of course, you can die, but it's not really the variance of champ packs, because it's always kind of the same question. Is there fanaticism and might? If not, you can probably play how you always play. But while in POD, it's a combination of affixes where you will just vanish from the screen. And yes, I wouldn't say Diablo 2 with maps is now POD like that, but just how maps increase the difficulty of enemies, and certain enemies more than others, it does kind of give it a little bit of that sense where you will sometimes just evaporate from the screen and not know why. So when I run 20 into Amplified Damage and 20 into Curse Mastery, it gives me a pretty powerful Weaken. It also gives me a powerful Decrepify. It does both at, Decrepify would be minus 36% attack and cast speed, and Weaken is at minus 30% damage. The reason I run Weaken over Decrepify is because I think Weaken's overall better for my minions. It's a tough question. It'd be up to a personal preference. It's kind of hard for me to decide which one is really better. But I use Weaken. For one, Weaken lasts longer, so that's part of the reason, is Decrepify has to be recasted way more often. By the way, 20 full rejuves is 1 Roldstone shard, and many people will trade you 120 full rejuves for a Mal. So just keep that in mind while you're playing the game. So what was I talking about? 20 into Amplified Damage and 20 into Curse Mastery. So I have a very nice ability to stay safe. There is one final reason that's really important of why you go 60-40. And that's because when you do Uber Diablo, which Revives are the single best ability in the game against Uber Diablo, I challenge someone to prove me wrong. I actually think that unless a smiter has GG gear, me, with my pretty good in-game gear, like it's in-game gear. I wouldn't call it GG, but it's in-game gear. I would say that with 6 revives and 5 clay golems, with amp damage and lifesteal, I will more reliably and quickly kill Ubers than a smiter. I'm pretty confident on that. I would love to see somebody with evidence that it's not true. I can post the video of Uber Diablo. It's not that exciting. I mean, most classes can kill him anyways. It's more just flexing that revives are that good. But is that really cool because I'm complaining about the ability and how volatile and variable it is, and that it increases RNG in a game that's already so dependent on RNG? So I guess it's not cool. Anyways, the reason I go 60-40 is because the one problem about Uber Diablo over the other Uber, Uber Mephisto and Uber Bale, is that Uber Diablo does very high damage and has high health regen. So if Uber Diablo keeps killing your summons, it doesn't matter how powerful they are, because he will kill lords, even the ones that are immune to fire or immune to lightning. He will destroy them. And if he kills them, you'll have to revive them, which means you have to rely on Desecrate. And if you rely on Desecrate, you might not get the good enemies, or the good minions. And if you don't get the good minions, guess what? Uber Diablo just healed back to full. Okay, I'll just cast some Clay Golems. Oh, but your Clay Golems are dying. Oh, Uber Diablo's back up to full health. So, I found out pretty quickly that the best way to kill Uber Diablo, although I could do it with revives and amp damage, an 80-20 split, the one where you go skeletons and revives, it's not reliable. The way I found was really easy to kill him and kind of nullified the difficulty of the entire fight in any way, just like a smiter still nullifies the difficulty when they get, GG gear, is by running amp damage, weaken, and life tap. And with 20 points in the Curse Mastery, my life tap gives them 19% lifesteal. And with a Moonlord, they never die. My skeletons don't even die, and they don't even attack that quickly, even with Faith. Clay Golems never die, and they don't attack that quickly, even with Faith. Skeletal Mages, they'll die, but you can Desecrate, by yourself or over on the other side of the screen, and then revive or resummon them. It's not a big deal. They don't even do that much damage anyways, but it's not that hard to keep them back up. What they're nice for in that fight, if you are running Skeletal Mages, is that they kind of distract some of the minions that spawn. But even with just 60 in the skeletons and then 40 in the curses, I can still easily kill Ubers because I'll just go amp, weaken, life tap, and my skeletons won't die. And I will do enough damage to pretty effectively kill Uber Diablo without too much stress. But in the end, definitely go Revives. Revives are the best single target ability in the game The only reason why you don't see people talking about Revive more when it comes to like Dclone is because Dclone is even more extreme than Uber Diablo. He doesn't regen health. He's basically easier to kill than Uber Diablo. The problem is he does so much more damage that you can't really face tank his abilities. You can watch fights online where very well geared players don't really face tank his abilities. They might every once in a while eat some damage to do some damage and cast a few Feel Juves. But even, GG geared Wolf Barbs or Zons will still dodge many attacks. And that is something that is unique to Dclone, where his damage is so high that basically no matter what you do, the way the game's designed, you will never have enough damage reduction to... I wouldn't say you could never face tank him. There's probably a build at some point that could face tank him, but you'll always see your life shift dramatically, and that was something that isn't in the vanilla game. I mean, if you're a smiter, like you don't even need life tap to proc that quickly, and you can kill Ubers. It's pretty pathetic. But basically, they gave him such high damage that with his frame attacks, it doesn't really matter how much resistance you have, because even if you have 95% fire resist, his fire attack is going to ticket you for like 200 damage every frame. I'm not an expert on this. You can look up the math. It's pretty insane. So you can't really face tank him, and at one point, bosses weren't doing appropriate damage to minions, which is why people did run Revives against Dclone. It was actually one of the best abilities, but once they fixed that, it was unintended. Revives die too quickly. So I've been theorycrafting an idea about how to kill Dclone with a necromancer, and that would be to do a 40-60 split or a 20-80 split. So you put 40 or 20 into summoning, and then 60 or 80 into curses. If you're going 40, you would go full clay golem. A nice little fun idea would be full blood golem. And the other little cute idea would be 20 into revive, 20 into golem mastery, 1 point into clay golem. And that would be another kind of cute idea. That might actually be the best split for the summoning side. I think it has a nice ability to do damage, have some CC from clay golems, and yet you'd still get a nice amount of points into your curse masteries. So where you go with the curse masteries, you get amp damage. It's too good, and amp damage increases your life tap for your minions. So basically, amp damage is both offensive and defensive. And then you would cast life tap and weaken. I think weaken on Uber Diablo would be better than Decrepit Feet. But I'm not positive on that. I'm sure someone could run the math and tell you more accurately, which would be better, more accurately. But I think off the top of my head, it would make more sense to cast Weaken. So you would cast, your level 20 amp damage for minus 70 resistance, your level 20 Weaken for minus 70% damage, and Dclone has full effect from curses. He has a 75% curse reduction, so they last less long, but they have full effect. And then cast a nice juicy 20% lifesteal for all your minions. And I think with that combination, they could last long enough where they would do reliable, consistent damage to where having to recast your minions, at least you're casting a minion that will do some damage, and so you won't just run out of full juice. Because when I tried him, I ran into a problem where it doesn't matter how long I can stay alive, my minions don't ever do enough damage to be worthy of being casted. That's why people run poison or even bone for doing Dclone, because every cast does reliable damage. He doesn't regen health. You just need to stay alive, not take too much damage, and get a nice chunk off him every time you cast a few bone spirits or desecrates. The reason why summoning druids, and by the way, I'm not a fan that summoning druids are overall better than summoning necros, but I believe they still are. The reason why summoning druids still function against Dclone is because of Raven. Reliable, consistent damage. Every time you cast Raven, it is worth the time and the damage you take to cast it. We don't have that. That's why you need to spend more points into curses to, cut the balls off of Dclone a bit so your minions can get some damage on him, and then you also don't take too much damage while you're doing it, because summoning druids are more tanky than necros, just not considering curses. Like, no one would argue that. But when you put in my weaken, I think I could actually tank Dclone just as well as a summoning druid. And then the last split, I brought up the Golem, Clay Golem, the Blood Golem, or the Revive plus 20 in the Golem Mastery for 5 clays that are pretty weak but have like a nice split. Is you could go just 20 into Revive, Amp Damage, Curse Mastery, Weaken, Max Decrepify. And the reason I'd go Max Decrepify then is you could just... It's tough. You would either go Max Decrepify or Max Life Tap. I think at that point it would be better to go Max Decrepify because you would want to survive more. Because basically you'd get your initial onslaught of Moonlords. They're gonna die. Okay, they're gonna die at some point, and you just cast a few of this Desecrates, and you just rely on the fact that Dclone is doing such little damage that you are casting enough damage yourself every time you push Revive on the Desecrated minions. So that's my idea, and I think it would have some success. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. GG, boys.